Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Steps to Sold podcast. Today is our topic, what buyers look for in the first 30 minutes of reviewing your deal. And if your goal is to sell your business fast, for all you out there listening, this is where your deal is won and lost a lot of times. It's not in the valuation. Yes, that matters. It's not in the financing. Yes, that matters. It's what buyers see in the first real 30 minutes of doing some actual diligence and review of deals out there. Obviously, once an NDA in financial form are signed. But on that note, Chris, I think this is going to be a fun one today. We got a lot of really good insights, and for those listening, take notes.
Absolutely. First 30 minutes is so important. Why 30 minutes? We're just throwing that number out there. It could be, 15 minutes, it could be 45 minutes, but it's not going to be hours. And that's what we want to kind of stress on this podcast is no buyer is going to spend hours of their time evaluating your deal and making a quick decision if this is something they want to come to. If you miss that window of really kind of, you don't have to blow them out of the water, but they have to fully understand your business within that window. And if the deal doesn't make sense, I can promise you they're going to slow down or stop looking at it altogether and move on.
You're exactly correct. You're not going to get the deal done in that moment. But what matters is, especially for bigger companies, especially lower middle market businesses, buyers looking at 5, maybe 10 businesses, even a day or a week, depending on what industry they're looking for and how specialized they are. Their attention is limited, and they also want to make sure what they're looking at is what they want to invest in. A lot of buyers have a pretty specific box, maybe in a wider box, but there are a couple key elements we're going to address in a little bit that they really, really want to see. And if the ad is one way and the delivery right after they sign the NDA is different, snap, they're gone, they're out the door. And it makes it very hard to get people back in. So if your business doesn't pass the test in the first 30 minutes, as we're going to call the time window, it doesn't really matter how good it is, you're probably not going to sell. And that's one of the hardest factors in marketing companies for sale. Because remember, those listening, businesses are sold confidentially. So when a buyer first inquires, they don't know the name, they don't know a lot, they just get a basic blind profile. So you have to filter them into this NDA phase. And from there, you got to deliver. And if you don't deliver, then it's done. So a buyer's going to ask themselves when they first say they're browsing Biz by Seller or our Sunbelt website, Chris, or other websites. They're look at a couple things. Is this business worth my time, right? Is it financeable? Does it even look real and the cash flow makes sense for the margins? Because good buyers who've been looking, they can look at a deal and say that STE, that EBITDA is way too high for the industry. There's too many ad backs. And a lot of times, is it too risky? Does this business make sense for me or make sense even to be sold with the way it's being set up? Granted, these are just blind profiles, but they're already running those scenarios through their head. They aren't fully underwriting. They're not verifying anything, but they're searching. So once they sign an NDA and they've gone through that mental process, now it dives into their mental checklist. Is it clear, transferable? Is there any risk levels, simplicity, the complexity of a deal maybe need to get it done? Does the deal size even fit what their financing or capacity to perform is? All that being said, what happens once they sign an NDA, Chris? I'll let you take it from here. They typically get the SIM or some kind of presentation packet. And why is that so important to be accurate at that time?
Yeah, this is the initial information push. And what I tell my clients, my sellers, is that I'm trying to give them 85 to 90% of the information they need. No, we're not going to give them everything. We're not going to go into super granular detail. That'd probably take a 150-page SIM to give them every detail about
and they're not going to read it.
Right. But you got to understand, buyers are not trying to prove the deal works when they first review the SIM for the first time. They're not trying to come up with deal structure or put together an offer. And I'll tell you what they're really trying to do. They're trying to eliminate or quickly come up with reasons why they want to eliminate this business. They're trying to find that red flag. Hey, should I spend any more time on this? I've spent 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes on it. I haven't come up with anything yet. Do I want to keep diving in, or are there immediate red flags? It's to them, it's for a lot of buyers, it's more about disqualifying risk than validating opportunity. They're trying to find reasons to say no quicker than does all this make sense. Now, if they're going to spend hours looking at your business, now they're trying to find reasons to say yes. But that first 30 minutes that we're talking about today, I'd say if something feels off early, even if it could be explained later, many buyers are not going to take us another step to dig deeper.
You're exactly correct. And people forget that's part of the process, that buyers are looking at the first glance, in our opinion, we both agree there, they're looking why they shouldn't buy it. This isn't due diligence. This isn't, granular detail information. This is how quickly can the packet they get, can they absorb it, dig through it, and find the 5 or 6 key elements to say, yes, it's past the initial sniff test. Let's move into the next discussions, speaking with us as brokers, speaking with the seller possibly, maybe a buy-sell meeting in person or via Zoom, whatever the logistics may be. So let's talk about, what are the most important things they're going to look at? Number one, I think it's stated time and time again, we're going to hit it hard here. The disclosed cash flow and the add backs. I think every buyer I've ever spoken to, the first thing they go to when they get the SIM or any kind of presentation packet, they go look right to the cash flow. Because on the ads, remember, sellers and buyers, especially you new buyers out there, typically you'll get a blind profile with some revenue numbers, a cash flow or EBITDA number, and some FF&E. What that number is, you have no idea what constitutes to make up that number. So they're going to go right to that cash flow normalization statement from the broker in the SIM. And what is that going to say? Here's the net, officer's comp, depreciation, amortization. We can go down the list of things that add backs. They're going to look at that right away. And if they see a 20-item add back list of God knows everything under the sun included, typically you just lost them. You did. Unless it's very minor amounts of add backs, and the net profit, depreciation make up the majority of it. But if you start seeing a whole bunch of stuff thrown in there, that's a red flag to a buyer. It shows that someone tried to grossly inflate the value of this company, which means that the cash flow is grossly inflated, the value is now grossly inflated, and Chris, as you as I know, they're out the door. That's the first major red flag. If you lose them there, it's done, which is why the valuation stage is important. But in that first 30 minutes, that buyer's saying, is this cash flow real? Because everybody wants to find the business with the proper cash flow. And so often they're advertised and improper add backs are thrown in there that just, they don't make sense. Yes, we do add backs and personal expense. Yes, there are some one-time revenue issues we can address. I'm very stingy on that, as I know you are. If we're going to add it back, it's got to be 100% verifiable and clearly displayed in that point. It's not just going to say, see broker. That doesn't do any good. That screams, we don't know what it is. We threw it in there, and that kills your opening window. For you, I want you to bring this down because you've dealt with this more times than I have. The next thing I think is customer concentration, revenue breakdown, right? What are they looking for there? What is that like? What do you see as what they want, and then the red flags if they don't see it?
Yeah, they want customer concentration to be as low as possible, right? They'd love it if everybody was less than 1%, honestly. That means if you lose one customer, that's not
nothing.
Real world. Real world is, the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue comes from, 20% of your customers or vice versa. But it's that kind of rule. So that you're always, every business I've ever looked at has that one customer, minimum 5, 6. Buyers do not want to see probably above 10 to 15%. You get above 10 to 15%, we've got a little situation to address at some point. And the way we counteract that as brokers is make sure that information is known from start. If this is a deal killer for you, we are giving it to you. You don't need to waste your time. Don't waste our time. Don't waste our clients' time. This is just what it is. You can come in and you can work on that. You can get some more customers and try to reduce that customer concentration. But yeah, seeing that, or let me put it this way. If you don't put that up front and they find that out later, that is almost always a deal killer. If it wasn't known and they've spent hours now and finally they ask for that report that says customer by revenue and they see that customer number one is 25%, you can bet that your valuation at least is going out the door. They're not going to buy into your valuation because they had to ask for that information to get it. And now they feel like they're figuring it out rather than you figuring it out and telling them. Whole psychological mindset, deal leverage shift right there happening. So basically all the story needs to point in the same direction. If everything lines up, financials, operations, the story that we're selling as what this business is, and it's truthful, they are going to lean in. But if any of those pieces start feeling disconnected, even slightly, it creates doubt in the buyer's mind, and doubt in the process is very hard to recover from later. I will tell you that. I mean, talk to me about this, Brandon. How often have you seen deals lose momentum early just simply because something didn't feel consistent with the way the buyer was perceiving it? You tried to address all those. I know as brokers, we both do that. But you get buyers that come along and they just didn't feel like things lined up and they're walking. What kind of major issues have you seen with that as far as trying to get that buyer to come back to the table even after you've addressed the issue that they thought was an issue?
It is so hard because once you lose that goodwill, as you just mentioned, it sours the deal a little bit. And buyers that have lost faith or have declining interest, getting them restarted back on the hump, back up, is so tough. It's like coming off a caffeine crash. you don't want to buy more caffeine, but you know you need it. But it's a mental hurdle you don't want to do. We see it a lot, specifically in trade businesses and construction businesses, where the cash flow lines up here. And for brokers and groups that don't outline, hey, residential versus commercial, service versus contract, and especially in construction, I've seen it happen more deals than not, where the seller tells us, this is my WIP report, my work in progress, which every buyer for construction is, how much do you have booked out and how long and how big and how diversified are those contracts? We've had several deals where we were told it was, let's say for easy math, $1 million. Not quite, but just for discussion purposes today. We get in, we advertise that, we get rolling. All of a sudden, we're 1 month in. Well, the WIP changed to $600,000 now. Why didn't you tell us that a week ago? Why didn't you want to scare the buyer? They're going to be furious because what they're projecting their cash flow capacity is down 40% now. In other news, I've had great sellers tell us, hey, my WIP is growing, update it regularly. That's good news. In discerning that kind of concentration of revenue and what kind of revenue, especially in the specific industries we deal with, that is so important for buyers to see when they get in there, because they want to understand what they're buying. In some buyers' box, maybe we want no new construction, or we love it. With plumbing, we've got a great mechanical contractor. Does mostly new construction and civil work. It's amazing how many buyers get there and we put it directly in the buying profile, still inquire in the first 30 minutes. Well, I didn't want that. We have it in the ad. Like, we're even trying to save you the first 30-minute click, but that's why it's there. And then they realize, oh, sorry, thank you, goodbye. But they appreciate the fact that that was a key red flag deal killer for them, disclosed early. That's okay. For the buyers that want that, they want to see it right away and keep moving forward. That's a good deal. That's the right way to structure things. And that's what, as you mentioned, you lose them, it's hard to get back on board. I've seen it time and time again. We've been able to revive deals that way by getting updated numbers. However, as you mentioned, once it slips, it's a lot harder to get back, which is why the first presentation is so important, to lock in the buyer and also reassure the buyer what they inquired on is legitimate, what was advertised, and meets expectations. Because once you've done that, it goes from, I don't want to buy it, why shouldn't I buy it, to I want to buy it, this really meets what I've been looking for, I'm going to run a lot faster now. And that leads to the next page in the sim typically, which is key management, key employees, organizational structure. That's probably the number 2 page behind the cash flow, in my opinion. I think revenue is up there, but I think really that's the next page I would go to if I was looking to buy a business, especially owners that are out here listening today. All the searchers out there, everybody wants the semi-absentee, management in place. You know the buzzwords. I know them too. They're not that common. We wish there were more of them. We'd sell them all. But in reality, every good owner wants to know, seller, what owner isn't dependent on that company? What company does not need that owner to sit there every day? Are there good management? Are there field hands? You and I have done a deal where we highlighted the key employee manager early on, and that's how we sold that deal, right, Chris? That was a massive component, but it was highlighted early. We broke down responsibilities, what they made, and that was highlighted immediately. And that's what kept the buyers engaged. The key management was structured out and shown how much hours needed to run this business from the owner, from the manager, what was available. What else do you see in that section that you see buyers often ask, say, Chris, tell me more about this, or that's a key factor for them?
They want to know the age of employees. In fact, I had a
That's
pest
a good one.
control. Yeah, I had a pest control here recently, and it was important. Why? Because the business was 40 years old, and the employees were in their mid to late 60s, early 70s even. And so luckily we found a buyer who that wasn't an issue for them. They were already in the industry. They understood how that worked, and they understand these guys they get the job done, right? I can tell you guys in their 60s that are still working and doing routes and things like that, they get the job done every time. So that wasn't an issue for them. But yeah, in other
But
businesses,
it's transition.
that are other industries, that may signal like, hey, a lot of guys are about to be retiring. What am I actually buying here? How fast am I going to need to turn these over? Or how are these guys going to retire? That's a big concern, is are these guys going to
Yes.
retire the minute I buy this business because they don't want to work for a new owner, a new personality, and all that stuff? They don't want to go through this. So that can be a big hurdle to see. Definitely age is one. Having that number 2 guy in place is key, like you mentioned. But I think just having a management team in general built out, not just the number 2, but do you have, especially if you've got 30, 40 employees or more, the buyer wants to see that you've got management team. Not everything hinges on the owner and him getting it done every single day, because a lot of buyers, I'd say at least half, aren't looking to buy a job or be there full time. They're looking at it more as a somewhat
Investment.
passive investment. Owning a business is never a passive investment. I want to let everybody know that that's listening
It
to
is
that.
not. PSA, everybody, PSA.
Yeah,
Public
go to
service
the stock.
announcement.
Go.
You
see
have to work.
Go see E-Trade or Morgan Stanley invest in stocks if you want passive investments. Owning businesses is never 100% passive. Never. Absolutely. And I wouldn't even say it's anywhere close to it most of the times. I've spent 20 years trying to make mine as much passive as it is, and I'm still spending hours a day on it. So it's a never-ending battle.
But I'd love to add to that. You have organizational structure built in because of that. And I think that's where a lot of these owners don't always know it's key to outline and have manuals, have those procedures outlined, and define clear roles. Because when a buyer comes in, they need to understand how the organization works. And the bigger it is, the more important it is to be able to highlight that in the first 30 minutes, that they're managers in these key positions, how the structure works up, and what their roles really are. Do you have a bunch of people that can make their own autonomous decisions, or is it still all filtering up to the owner having to make the final call? That's a much different company, no matter how big or small it is. And we find businesses that come to us wanting to sell where they can say, no, my managers handle those decisions. They handle pricing or they handle inventory and stocking. Only thing I check on is if it's an order over X percentage of value. That's great to highlight in that first packet because that tells the buyer these people can make autonomous decisions and are entrusted. They're worthy of this role. Not, hey, these are just hourly workers that I have to supervise again and again and hope they do it right. So that's another massive bump in value, but also a clear indicator to a buyer, I want to pursue this further. That's a huge, huge area right behind cash flow. That's probably number 2. Depending on the business, maybe trade revenue, trade businesses, maybe the revenue and concentration is more important, but typically it cash flow and management. From there, I think we talked about revenue. I would say this, Chris, too, the next most important one of our 5 is specialized licensing, transferability, and I didn't say processes involved in that. Because if you can't, my favorite word, I'm going to say it again on the podcast, transferability. If you can't transfer it, it ain't worth anything. And that goes for the data too, and the workers. We talked about, I think, on a few episodes back about knowing what your competition uses for software or the big boys ahead of you strategically and having that software integrated. Because if they can't take your customer data, what's so important, how you run your business, and give it to someone else or access it, that's really going to hinder the ability to sell the company. And when that can be highlighted as a clear automated process with a CRM, with sales and marketing teams, with programs in place, that tells a buyer too, who's looking for the passive investment, but as we just said, it's never really real, there's more confidence there. They know there's not just shooting at the hip hoping business comes through the door, or licensing can be transferred and it can keep operating. That's so important because some buyers realize right away, I'll never be able to get that license, or I didn't realize that was an issue, but I'm not going to get that license. That is key. And I also say too, Chris, I want you to touch on this point, number 5, because number 4 is pretty simple. We touched on that. I think we've touched on that more episodes than I can remember. But the 5th and final issue is overall risk and simplicity. And what do I mean by that? Buyers are subconsciously scoring all these key issues. What about the sim, the way it flows, wraps it up and then gives them that final pat on the back? What would you say in how you lay your sim out and your packets out in that first 30 minutes that tells a buyer the flow, it's okay? And I know it's kind of a broad statement, but I'm trying to wrap it up into how do you kind of make the conclusion of your paragraph, right? How do you finalize it in the sim to give someone a final stamp or in the packet that says, let's go?
Yeah, I think you tell them, first of all, you need to tell them that sometimes buyers need to hear this. You need to hear that the seller is, you don't have to over leverage this, but he's motivated to sell, or at least he's
Yes.
really considering selling. And that there needs to be some kind of statement that indicates that. I have a lot of buyers come in and their first question after, what's the price of the business or how'd you value it, something like that. But they want to know, why is he selling? Why is he selling? You don't have to tell them they're motivated to sell in the fact that he wants out the door yesterday. But you have to give them that reason of why he's looking to exit, why he or her, I should say, are looking to exit. And I'd say the other thing is there can't be any confusion in the sim. That's going to cause way more damage if you're not clear on the financials,
Anything.
clear on the employees, clear on the layout. That you've got, it's almost like an elevator pitch on paper. You've got a very short amount of time, a little longer than 10 to 12 seconds. But you've got a short window to capture their attention, and it has to be
Precise.
laid out in a way that is purposeful and has meaning and gives them the complete overall picture of what this business really is, how it makes money, who makes the money, how much the owner works, and why are they looking to sell. If you can package that up and put it in a well laid out format, they're going to have 90% of what they need to analyze and continue on with the deal if they want to. And I think that's the most important part, is the layout of it and structuring it in a way that's easy to read and easy to comprehend. And then you've got something to work with. You probably have a buyer who's
Mm-hmm.
going to continue in the path, and they've got some interest in the business. What are your thoughts on that, Brandon? How do you typically lay out your sims to where you kind of conclude it and make sure that you give that buyer who's looking at it and reading it the full understanding of the business and end it professionally?
I love to keep a final page for what the owner would like to do post transition. If
Ooh,
I can
like
get a
that.
clear answer early on, like, hey, I would love to hang around for X amount of time. These people I know would want to hang around, or if I have family members involved, who they are, what they would like to do. Hit that out the park early. Let the buyer know what the seller's mindset of exiting looks like. It doesn't mean it's going to end that way always, but it gives them a clear picture of what the owner would like to do. So if they're starting to feel good about it, if the owner is, I want gone in 3 months, a buyer may say, look, I can't run that. That's too risky for me. I need you longer. But the owner can say, hey, I want to stick around for a year. I want to help. I want to do this specific role that I love to do. I just don't want to be an owner anymore. That tells the buyer exactly what that owner needs, what it may cost to maintain that, keeping the owner around, and also how to structure the transition, right? It kind of gives them that philosophy. And that kind of leads buyers into, do they want to say yes? How do they say yes after this test? Typically, we follow up a phone call. They often have questions for us. And we go through a clean and simple presentation with them. We go through the process. We have those questions answered. And if they have any red flags in the sim, we know quickly how to address them if the buyer does have questions. And like you said, the more cleaner, the sharper, the better. I like to keep my sims a little bit smaller. I don't think people need to read 5,000 pages of pictures and junk. A really good investment banker told me one time, when I get a sim from somebody, I keep the cover page, rip everything out, but the cash flow add back at the management. I'm not worried about anything else. All that's fluff. I want to be able to look at the numbers and look at the management. I don't care if it's 60 pages or 10 pages. I keep just those three. So I know what deal it came from. And this was back in the day when everything was done by, old school paper presentation package you would mail out. But it stuck to me. He didn't want to worry about anything else. He wanted to narrow down that mindset real quick. Does the numbers add up? And does this make sense for me? And who's the owner and what's the management look like? Because that's what he's looking for. You give them 550 pages of junk, they just feel like they're getting not sold, but no one wants to feel like the salesman is giving them too much data to make them feel comfortable. They want to get the data they want. Listen to what the buyer's telling you. And having done this, like you and myself, for over a decade plus now each, you know what buyers really want to see. And you know when to give it to them. You know how much to give them so they can properly process it. And that gets them to say yes. What will immediately kill deal interest? I'll tell you what, Chris, what I see time and time again when I see packets from other groups, just pages of egregious add backs and simplification of problems. Like if you've got a customer concentration issue, don't say there's one customer X. Be very clear how important. Give me really good detail on that customer. Maybe not the name of the company. I get it. You want to protect your client, the seller. But give me a really good explanation why that person is so much. And if they have been, how long have they been with the company? Like if the customer X is 20% of revenue, but they've been their customer for 20 plus years. If they've got a good contract, mention there's a contract in place. Or if they're not willing to sign one, put that up there. I get you want to keep, as brokers, you want to keep engagement, but give people clear and decisive answers so they can make clear and decisive decisions. You never will see fury more from a buyer that feels they've been misled on the sim, and then they get into the weeds or any presentation packet, mind you, and say, man, this sucks. Like this is terrible. Let me ask you this. How do you feel like this impacts selling your business fast? Because we talked about that's kind of the main focus of our latest couple episodes, how to sell it fast, how to sell your business fast or properly in the right timeline. How does that 30-minute test being passed in your mind really, if you could put a metric on it, increase the chances of a deal being sold in a timely manner, but also even getting done?
Yeah, let's say it's a legitimate buyer who really has intent on buying a business.
Yes.
You package it well and give them everything they need, and there's no major red flags, or you address the red flags and they're not that big, but you address them early. You've got a 80 to 90% chance of this buyer, if they were, legitimately not just kicking tires, they were looking to buy a business, 80 to 90% chance of them moving forward. Buyers do not need perfection to move forward. Let me clarify that again. They do not need perfection in your business. What
real
they need is
buyers.
confidence. They need confidence in the information they're getting. If they can quickly understand the business makes money, who runs it, and what risks they're stepping into or what they're taking on, they are so much more likely to engage, at least, have another conversation past the sim, past this initial information that they've been given. Clarity builds more confidence, and confidence drives action. If they get confidence that they can move forward in this and not look like a fool because they spent hours on a business, "Oh, I didn't realize this." Once they find that red flag later in
Hmm.
the deal process, that is a deal killer because it wasn't announced up front. When a deal is easy to understand up front, it becomes so much easier for a buyer to move forward.
I would say too, when the packet is correct and there's good information, if it's in a specific industry, let's say a popular one, your chances of increasing the number of LOIs or offers you can get will go up dramatically because buyers didn't understand in the right space, in the right industry, with the right packet, they know if they're reading it the same way everybody else is going to read it, they know there's going to be much more competition. So they're going to speed up their process knowing that there's going to be a backlog of people coming behind them wanting to buy this company. That's not saying that this packet we produce is going to give you 20 offers. Just pump the brakes there for anybody listening. What I'm getting at is when we get proper presentation, proper alignment on value, marketing, and then we have this first 30-minute window and you present it properly. This allows the next stages to really flow better. And that leads to the LOI phase, which we did a podcast on a couple weeks ago. I also tell owners what it really does is also weeds out the good, the bad, and the ugly. We talk about what turns them off. What turns them on is important too. But what it also does, it tells the broker if the buyer is serious and they actually read the sim or read through the presentation packet and went through all the materials, they're going to have very good questions to ask now. Ones that might save them a week or two of initial analysis to skip the process. That means you're getting a better qualified buyer with better understanding, asking real, authentic, and good questions about your company that then allows you to also tell us, Mr. Seller, hey, I really like this guy. You know what? This guy's asking dumb questions. Or you know what? I like him, but I want to hear what the other people have to say too. You'd be surprised that giving someone the proper homework to do and they actually do it allows for a much better transition into the next few phases. When there's stumbling blocks there, that's when items tend to get left off, missed, overhit, and then, as you said, Chris, they pop up later. It doesn't mean this is the most important step of the deal, but what we're highlighting here is why this step is so important to capturing the proper attention and then parlaying that into the future steps of a deal. As in, we talked about in other episodes, what to expect before an LOI, what to expect after. This is that kind of that key component pre-LOI that you really want to make sure when you pick an advisor, they're going to execute here well. This is where deals really get started. It might not seem like, oh, well, the valuation phase. That's when the listing gets started. When the deal starts is right here. And setting expectations here is crucial to executing down the road. Because you may only get sometimes a few inquiries on specific deals. Every business with $1 million EBITDA is going to get a ton. But this portion is how you weed that down to the right people and allow us also to help you identify who to speak to in a more professional manner. Not every John, Harry, and Larry coming through the door, one-man groups or other groups trying to just see what's out there.
Right.
So let's ask this, Chris. Before going to market, so we can make this proper, we're going to kind of, got a little off topic here, but I want people listening to understand how much it takes to get to this point for us so you understand why the information is presented the way it is. To prepare going to market, to get this packet together, what do we need? Obviously, we need cleaned up financials, right? And clear understandings of revenue. What else would you add is important to have at this point for us to make sure this packet is clear and concise?
We're going to need that employee list that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of a employee roster, rate of pay, how long they've been with the company, some kind of age reference. It can be date of birth or it doesn't need to be that specific. It could just be kind of what range they're in. Asset list. That I found that to be a tricky one. It doesn't seem like it should be that tricky.
But it
A
can
lot of
be.
people, a lot of people rely on their depreciation schedule from their last tax return. That's not
Not the
always
best.
that's not always
No.
accurate. And the other thing is you got to go through it because usually there's at least at a minimum 1 or 2 personal vehicles on there. The owner's truck that he's going to keep is on there. A lot of times there's a lot of stuff that was thrown away or salvaged years ago and it just got left on there because no one
Lingering.
ever told the CPA to take it off. So I'm always surprised how much trouble I have in getting an accurate asset list, furniture, fixture, equipment, things like that. I loved your comment about, what the owner's intentions of staying on are, what they're open to. That absolutely, I think that's a great point. Should be added on there. What
Yes.
else is, that's kind of like your private equity guy said. Don't overinflate it with a lot of fluff and garbage that just to try and sell a buyer. Give them the meat and potatoes of what they need to see. And I think if you've got that in there, you've got better alignment on what a buyer is expecting to see on their initial pass. And once you've got alignment,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a they're going to have a better understanding. There's going to be better momentum in the beginning. Momentum
Mm-hmm.
creates better conversations, stronger offers,
It
better
does.
timelines, faster timelines. So, don't as a broker, don't put too much in there that you're trying to oversell. I look at a lot of deals myself to
Yeah, we
looking at
have.
acquiring
You and I.
businesses. The one thing I hate to see is when somebody tries to sell me on how this company could grow. I don't mind a couple bullet points on that to tell me what you're thinking. That's fine. But don't
It's
give me
okay.
page after page of why the business owner hasn't grown the business this way and how I could or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. That's the fluff. I think your private equity guy was probably talking about stuff like that.
We looked at a deal recently, you and I, a service business, and that was 80% of the presentation. It's like, that's irrelevant. I'm looking at a proven model. Why is the model here making sense? And if it's not, then this is kind of pointless. And you hit the nail on the head too, and that reverts back to my main point. It's okay to put a few notes, but if the whole packet is going to do the deal, my dad always said this, and I will stand by this: a packet doesn't sell a company. And if a salesman or a group has to use a packet to sell something, they're not selling you what they're selling you the piece of paper that it's on. And that's so important. And to buyers out there listening and sellers, it seems like this was a very heavy focus on just what is a SIM podcast, but that's not what it's about. In the modern era, information is traditionally going to be sent now digitally, and that packet's going to go out. Why Chris and I hit so hard on these topics was explain to you what you should be diving in for. In the first 30 minutes, you as a seller should know what we need to know, and what a buyer you should be looking at, and how all this synchronizes into achieving the singular goal of wanting to get the business sold to the right person. And all these key data points align typically in that first packet or first presentation of information, whether it's in person or via packet. We have some buyers that want to come in right away, won't sign the NDA, sit down and talk. We're going to hit the same topics, maybe not on paper, but in person. And we may give them a packet to walk away with as well to review later. The goal is to do what we just mentioned. Identify the 5 key issues that should give you a thumbs up, thumbs down, give confidence to the deal, and spur on the next conversation in the appropriate manner. When that first 30 minutes falls apart, that's when you lose people. That's when deals just don't make sense. And I've been in rooms when we sat down with buyers, in the first 5 minutes, I saw the eyes just kind of go, kind of droop. You could see the shoulders slide. It's already done. And I'll ask them, what don't you like about the deal already? And they're like, well, you haven't finished. I'm like, well, I can already tell by your body language you're not loving what I'm hearing. So let's go back and focus on what you didn't like, because there's no point going further if there's already red flags. Let's talk about those red flags and make sure you understand what they are. And a lot of good buyers I've dealt with in the past say, you know what, yep, it's just not for me. That's okay. Thank you. Other buyers, no, I like it. That scares me, but highlight why I can overcome this, or what can be worked around, or is there a reason why? And that's okay. But it's part of the process. It's not a check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next phase. It's a culmination of emotion, decision-making processes, and understanding it. And the final thing I would say I would add, for deals that it makes sense for, showing a debt service capacity to perform, especially for ones using SBA loans. When the right deal and the right financials are there in the first place, you can often show a buyer what an ROI on their cash investment for that investment would be with an SBA loan. That's good for buyers to understand a pre-qualified stamp, or a lender looked at review the numbers to know this deal is bankable. I didn't mention that earlier, but that's also one that sometimes at the bottom of the packet is worthy of putting in if it's a pre-qualified deal that makes sense to do that for.
Yeah.
Did we miss anything, Chris?
I'll tell you
I
one
feel like
thing.
it was a
Let me-
shorter
let me
episode,
talk
but we
about
wanted
this.
to
I'll
kind of
tell you
make it
one
clear
thing.
today for all.
Yeah. Well, one thing is alignment
No,
on
go ahead.
information received.
Well said. Well said.
And the where that falls out of place, especially for brokers, for myself, is you've got to understand for buyers, and this goes to buyers and sellers. We're going to kind of talk about both points of view here. Buyers look in, they come in, they get the initial information, and everything checks out as far as what's advertised and what's seen. And then they get a recent P&L, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more than just a little bit off from what was
Yes.
advertised, what's in the sim. Why is that the case? You gotta understand that's not probably the broker not updating information. It's the seller, and so now I'm speaking to sellers. When we don't get a P&L for 4 or 5 months, even though we've requested it, and we're into this deal and we know we got a
Mm-hmm.
huge information push up front. We ask you for so much stuff to get this listing up and get all the information out so buyers can review it. But now 3 or 4 months in, we're asking for an updated P&L, and there's a lot of sellers that I work with. It's like pulling teeth to get that. They've got to go to their
Yes, it
CPA.
is.
CPA's busy. He's on vacation. It's going to be whatever. It seems like months go by before you get that updated P&L. And now
Mm-hmm.
buyers are looking at old information. They get the new information. Alignment is no longer happening. I've
Yes.
got a client right now, just throw him under the bus a little bit. It's in the oil and gas industry. That is a volatile industry to be in. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting P&Ls every 6 months, 8 months, which, I'm asking for them every quarter, but it's taking a lot
It's
longer to get
tough.
them. What happens is that buyer comes in, they see that oil and gas, your business dropped $400,000 in profitability, but the price hasn't changed. That's where sellers anchor. They will not change. You give them that valuation up front, and it's 7, $8 million, whatever it is. Entertaining 5 or 6 million because your business declined is not even an option for them. I don't know any seller that I've ever worked with that's okay because their profitability dropped, that they're okay adjusting accordingly with the multiple that was described to them up front of how we came up with the valuation. That's just a tough thing. So when you see businesses sit on the market for months and sometimes even years, I don't know if that's the case every time, but I'm going to tell you it's the case sometimes. It's unfortunate because it was probably a great listing, probably still is a great listing, but they've anchored on a price and they're not willing to
Be
change it
reasonable.
because their business has changed. Do you see that a lot, Brandon, or what's your kind
Yeah,
of?
I do. I do. And often what's frustrating, it happens a lot, like I mentioned earlier, with the whip report and construction companies or business like that. Like, man, if your whip report really is becoming volatile, we need to know. We need to address that because if this is a financeable deal and all of a sudden the whip is going up, down, not sure what's going to happen, that's a massive problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And it really hinders the ability for the buyer to feel confident in the cash flow is consistent. We've had some sellers allow us to make proper adjustments over time, and you're right. A
Sure.
lot of them just don't want to make the adjustment, though. And I understand they think, well, I started here, I want to get this price. But those out there listening, this is for you. It doesn't mean it's going to be a dramatic swing, but if you have a lot of volatility, we need to know immediately and properly adjust because, as we've mentioned in this episode 100 times, the first step is important. And if the buyer feels like they're getting a bad couple eggs, you're never going to sell your company. I could have 20 conversations on your business, but if each time it comes back to, hey, well, this wasn't presented right, or I have to take it out of the packet because I can't guarantee it, we're losing goodwill and faith. And that does not help you get your company sold. And if you want to make changes to your product. Let us know. We're here to help you sell the company. And buyers want us to get them an honest picture. No buyer wants a broker working just for the seller to inflate value. We're not going to do that. We want to know what you want to do. We have to know the truth to do it and present it properly. And if we don't have that, you're wasting our time. And then, be honest, you're probably not going to get sold. Because if we can't trust what we're getting, it's very hard for us to do a good job for you. Point blank. I know that sounds, maybe behind the scenes talk, but it's true. Everyone's actions matter accordingly in the deal. And when everybody puts the right foot forward, the deal gets done. And that first 30 minutes is the first culmination of all three parties, and maybe four if it's already a pre-qualified deal with a lender, starting off with the right foot forward. And that's the point of this episode today to all you listening. That is the focus. Deals die, time kills deals, but especially the first presentation is where you win or lose it to really get it going. That's all I got to say on that.
Yeah. I'd say this at the end of the day, buyers decide quickly where they're going to spend their time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Time is valuable to everybody, but especially those buyers out there looking for the right deal, and they're looking at no telling how many a day. If your business is clear, if it's credible, if it's easy to understand, that's going to create momentum right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. However, if it's not, you are fighting an uphill battle, and it's going to be hard for them to even get started. So I'd say the selling fast is not about convincing a buyer your business is just the greatest business ever. It's more about making it easy for them to see themselves within the first 30 minutes of reviewing. Hey, I think this
Owning
is a
it.
business that works for me. I think I could
Mm-hmm.
take this over. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I get an understanding of the revenue and the ad backs and the cash flow and the employees and what they do to produce cash flow. They can get that in 30 minutes. They are going to continue their journey looking at your business. And like I said, if they're a credible buyer, actually just looking to buy a business, not just looking at businesses to look at businesses, you stand an 80 to 90% chance of them moving
Moving
forward.
forward.
Well, I'm not
Yes.
going to say they're the
Gonna
90%
buy
chance they're
it.
going to buy your business, but 90% chance they'll move forward, look at more information, have a conversation with you, set up a site visit, and potentially make an offer at some point in the future. You don't want those offers coming in too quickly anyway. You don't want an offer a day after somebody's just reviewed your business.
They don't know enough to even make an honest
That's right.
decision.
You get an offer like that, that's a red flag for you as a seller. You want to see the timeline go right. You want to see them come in. You want to have those, make sure they got the information. They got to understand. They ask some
Do you
questions.
like them? Do you trust
Yeah.
them? Does the process sound correct?
Yeah.
Can they really see themselves sitting in this chair? Can you see them sitting in this chair and executing? Because that's just as important. And as we said on the last
Yeah.
episode, take a day to think about your deal. You mentioned it. You get the deal right away. Take a step back and think about that.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Use your business sense that's guided you for so long to be successful and think about it. You got to block out the visions of grandeur and say, hey, does this make sense? It's all about the right foot forward and transferability and clean financials. And we could go on 1,000 more bullet points, but we're not going to. If you listen to the podcast, you know as much as we know, to some degree, how important this really is, which is why we have these episodes for you to consume, learn, and interact with us and tell us what you want to hear from us and what you want like learning from us as well. Because it's Chris and I who devote our time to this for no real profitability gain for those of you listening, shameless plug. We do it for good, proper education out there for people to understand what it takes to actually do a deal. Because the more informed you are, the better we can do our job and the better we can help you obtain what you want to obtain. It's that simple. That simple. I think we nailed it on the head today, Chris. Just
Think
right.
we got it. Think we got it.
We did good. And if y'all don't like it, y'all let us know. It's okay. No hard feelings. We'll just block you. We'll just block you. I'm kidding. We won't do that. But we love feedback. So if those of you listening, please, you made it this far and you're not following, you're not giving us feedback, shame on you. Please do so. We appreciate it. On that note, this is a Step Stole podcast. I am Brandon Bourgeois. That is Christopher Sater. We will see you next week with another great episode. Y'all stay tuned.